Welcome to The Explainer. You ever notice how words aren't just words? Especially in politics, they're tools. Tools that can build someone up, or, as we're about to see, tear them down.
Okay, just look at this. It tells a powerful story right away. On the left, you've got the language often used for an upper-caste leader. On the right, a whole different vocabulary for leaders from marginalized communities. We're talking about the same actions, but the descriptions are worlds apart. One is facing challenges, the other is just plain incompetent. One is carrying on a political legacy, but the other gets hit with dynastic corruption.
And here's the thing, our source material makes crystal clear, this is not a coincidence. This isn't just a few random examples. It's a pattern, a carefully built story that's designed, very deliberately, to shape how we think.
So let's really dig into this. We're starting with what you could call a tale of two leaders, just to see how deep this disparity goes.
This table just lays it all out, doesn't it? If there's a problem with governance, one leader is seen as working through it, while the other is judged as failing. A family member gets into politics? For one, it's a noble tradition. For the other, it's proof of corruption. It's the exact same situation, but the narrative frame is completely different.
So, how does this actually happen? How are these narratives built? Well, there's a specific term for this, and a clear process behind it. Let's look at the anatomy of this discourse.
The source calls it Curated Hegemonic Discourses. I know, it's a bit of a mouthful, but the idea behind it is incredibly important. It's basically about how powerful stories are crafted to protect the existing power structures. And how do they do that? By making leaders from marginalized groups seem like they just aren't fit to lead.
Now, you're going to hear the term Bahujan a lot as we go through this. It's a key political term in India that brings together a whole bunch of marginalized caste groups, like OBCs and Dalits, who are pushing back against these historical power dynamics.
And this isn't just a theory or a feeling. The source points to actual data. A study from 2024 found that negative words, the ones linked to being corrupt or incompetent, were used almost 3 times more often, 2.7 times to be exact, in primetime debates when talking about Bahujan leaders. That's a huge difference.
So how do they build this narrative? The source describes this two-step process. First, you have the framing. The media, political opponents, they start using these go-to negative labels over and over. Populist, casteist, corrupt. Then comes step 2, amplification. Social media grabs hold of these frames and just runs with them, turning them into hashtags, memes, and viral clips that spread like wildfire.
And the result of all this? You get this bubble, this curated environment, where these negative stereotypes are repeated so often that they become the default. They become the common sense way of thinking about these leaders, almost before they've even had a chance to prove themselves.
So you might be thinking, okay, but why does this really matter? This is about so much more than just some unfair headlines. These narratives have real, tangible consequences out in the world. The source really hits the nail on the head with this quote. The whole point, the political function of this discourse, is to delegitimize the very idea that Bahujans can govern effectively. Think about that for a second. It's not just an attack on a person, it's an attack on the possibility of their success. And the fallout from this is severe. It creates a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? It sets these leaders up to fail. It also scares away new, talented people from these communities who might otherwise want to step up. And what it does, ultimately, is reinforce this old, damaging idea that power just belongs to certain groups. The source argues this chips away at the very foundation of equal citizenship. And make no mistake, this isn't just a politics thing, not by a long shot. The source is very clear that you see this same pattern playing out everywhere. In business, where entrepreneurs from marginalized communities get labeled inefficient. In academia, where their achievements are written off as being about quotas, not merit. Okay, so that all sounds pretty bleak. But it's not hopeless. The last part of our source material actually talks about how to start breaking this cycle. And the first step, the most important one, according to the source, is to see this problem for what it is. It's structural. This isn't about fixing one biased news report here or a tweet over there. It's about taking on the entire system that keeps churning these narratives out. So what does that actually look like? Well, the source suggests a few big things. First, we all need to be more critical of the language we see and hear. Second, maybe we need to think about guidelines for more balanced media coverage. And maybe most importantly, Bahujan communities need to build their own independent platforms, their own media, their own think tanks to tell their own stories. At the end of the day, the stakes here are, well, they're huge. The source concludes that this isn't just about being fair. It's about whether a democracy can actually live up to its promise, that where you come from shouldn't decide your future. Taking apart these curated stories is essential for the very survival of that democratic idea.
And that kind of leaves us with a final thought, a challenge really. Once you see this pattern, you start to notice it everywhere. So the question to ask yourself is, what are the unseen stories, the curated narratives, that are shaping your world? And what could happen if we all started to question them?